In the theological conversation world, pop culture podcasts are considered especially heinous. For the DOC, the dedicated co-hosts who instigate these vital conversations are members of an elite squad known as 2-on-1. These are their interviews.
Oh, friends, I am well done. So fun. Wait, play this sound. We finally got a theme song. Play it again.
Yes, that's parody, by the way. We're not claiming to be a spinoff of Law and Order. We're doing that because today we're talking SVU with Courtney Richards, and hooray.
So excited. And so Deuces, as you are listening to this, as we have just said, we are talking about SVU. While it's doubtful we'll veer into any conversation that would warrant some sort of content warning, you just never know. So we are discussing Law and Order Special Victims Unit, which is what SVU stands for. And so just know that it talks about sex-based crimes. There is violence, there are things like that. We're also going to talk about there's the possibility that we will talk about our opinions of the police and policing structures and funding and all of those things. Again, how this works is that I speak for me, Arthur speaks for Arthur, Courtney will speak for Courtney. And we also reserve the right to learn and grow and change. This is where we're coming from right now. And we love learning from all of you deuces out there who will reach out to us and tell us that we might have misunderstood something or should think of something in this way. And we are open to those conversations as long as they are kind and in good faith. But again, if you are not an SVU fan, if this just isn't your thing, you might have some trigger warning or triggers in yourself.
Yep. Go to jeffwonroe.com and we'll catch you next week.
Exactly. Go watch Mary Poppins again, because that was fun too. So yeah. Okay.
So when dealing with murder investigations, we have to consider motive, means, and opportunity.
Why did you start that with so when we're talking about murder, means, motives, or opportunity?
Well, I'm afraid, Spiff, that I'm doing this so that I may report a homicide. These Jeff Wonroe stoles simply slay.
I'm not entirely sure how to respond to this, but I do agree with you. But I don't know if encouraging these types of promos are responsible.
Well, you'll be drop dead gorgeous in a strictly theological, non-objectifying fashion when you order your vestments, paraments, and liturgical textiles, otherwise from Jeff Wonroe Designs.
It's true, I will. Jeff Wonroe Designs, as you all know, makes beautiful handcrafted liturgical textiles that fit a spectrum of spaces and a variety of denomination and uses.
And a friend of the show said we were over the top last week, and I'll bet it was because of this part of the promo that I am now repeating. If you process, there's processional banners. If you celebrate the seasons of the church year, there are seasonal banners. Do you need frontals up front, paraments on the perimeter? Is your alternating alteration or your lectern a new lease on life? Jeff Wonroe Designs has literally got you covered.
My word, are we over the top sometimes? And I love it. I am nothing if not my threeness in its fullness for over the top fashion things. But Jeff Wonroe Designs is celebrating 16 years, y'all. It can drive. 16 years of making ordinary time extraordinary, and clergy just like me. Truly, I love mine. Love their pastor stoles and their deacon stoles, chasubles, copes, and other vestments that they're proud to include Episcopals, the Episcopalians, Presbyterian, Methodist, ELCA, Lutheran, United Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, Unitarian, and Roman Catholic. Faithful among their clients. Interfaith and non-denominational clergy love their inclusivity in their designs as well. And if you guys have not seen, Jeff, like last week maybe, dropped new designs. And I always try and highlight them in our stories online and share them. I have like 2 in my cart right now because they are beautiful. So make sure that you are not just, I know you hear these every week, go every week and check out his new designs.
Right. So if you're shopping for a miter or a face mask or anything in between, and it would be simply criminal to not consider something new with the discount Spiff's about to tell you about, Jeff Wonroe Designs would be honored to work with you to create something perfect.
He really would. So deuces, as you know, you have to go to go visit Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNROW. Dang it, I was so close.
You're good.
For a catalog of stoles, investments, paraments, and banners, and even liturgical face masks, along with ordering information and customization possibilities, like know your height, or if you're buying it for someone, try and know their height. And use the special promo code 2on1 for 15% off your entire stole order. As we have said before, like if you're doing it on your phone, it's going to want to put you like right through to like Apple Pay and things like that. You got to go like to the end and put in your 2on1 code. It totally works. I have used it several times, and I know so many of you have as well. And we're really grateful for the ways in which you support us and support those who support us.
Absolutely. So that's once again 2on1, all one word, all letters. I'll use that at checkout because these stoles still steal the show. And that means that we should launch an investigation. But you should investigate jeffwunrow.com, JEFFWUNROW, after the show today.
You should.
Okay. That happened. And I'm happy.
Listen, I was stoked for it.
Hey,
I'm also stoked for today. I have been asking, for those of you that are following us online, also here's the plug, follow us online. I realize the numbers of those of you that watch us do not represent the number of those of you who follow us. So please, it's important that you like, subscribe, do all the things, share it with your friends, ask your friends to do it too. We don't overwhelm you with all the stuff. It just lets you know what's coming up. But it's really helpful for us to get the word out of what we are doing, because we have some really big announcements coming up.
Yeah, like huge,
like very exciting things. So it'll be really important that that is happening, because so many of you listen and download this podcast as a podcast or watch us online. And thanks. And I have been calling for today's episode since like the beginning, for like 2 years at this point. Well,
you have a very, I would actually say it's a healthy fascination with Christopher Maloney, who plays Stabler. So we're gonna bring in our guest. I was gonna do this thing where like we discover the guest the way that people discover the body inevitably in the beginning of Law and Order episodes, but Spiff told me it doesn't translate to Zoom or to podcasts, which is not incorrect. So
we're a pair.
We're gonna bring in our guest Courtney Richards with the sound effect. I think that worked.
It did.
Courtney Richards, welcome to 2on1. We're very glad to have you with us today.
What a fantastic entrance sound. Can I have that for everything I show up to?
Yes.
I think so.
Great. Love it.
You have some big things coming up, so we'll just make sure that you've got it on hand.
Yes.
That's the way that you can announce the reception.
Yes, that would be an amazing wedding reception entrance. I love it.
Your wedding cake could say executive producer Dick Wolf. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be.
You by Dick Wolf. Yeah.
This is probably is not clear that with the fiance first.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for being my SVU friend who, like, the minute that the new series came on, you were like immediate text message. And which, there's a lot of Law and Orders, but we all know my one true love is SVU.
That's right.
Is Law and Order Prime still on, or has that gone off?
No. The original's been gone for
a while.
I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, SVU's been on since the 90s. It's the last television show from the 90s still on the air. So I should have.
That's a fun fact. It is. It celebrated yesterday or 2 days ago. It was like 22 years since it debuted, and I was just like, and you just get like baby Stabler and baby Benson, and you're just like, oh, love it. But
I know,
Courtney.
Yeah.
Tell our deuces who you are, what are you doing, and why do you love SVU?
Oh, goodness. I am Reverend Courtney Richards. We'll throw that in for good measure. I am serving at Harvard Avenue Christian Church in good old Tulsa, Oklahoma, where it is merciful Jesus finally feeling like fall after it being 1,000 degrees all summer long.
Yeah, it's 70 in Wichita right now.
Oh, man, my soul has needed that break from the humidity. Lord. I do a little bit of everything. My title is Connections Pastor. So sort of imagine whatever you might think that includes. It probably does. I also am a member of the board of Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, which is our interfaith, multi-faith organization here in Tulsa. For more than 80 years, folks of all faiths in the city have been gathering together to do the work of justice and advocacy and community building. And it's really been a great honor the last, gosh, I guess 8 of the 9 years I've been here in Tulsa, I've been part of that group. So that's a really great group of colleagues and friends, and doing lots of good things here. Those are sort of my 2 big professional things. I am an avid TV watcher. I will come home at the end of the day and just binge. I will watch hours of TV while I'm doing lots of other things. So I watch lots of stuff. And I would wager that I have seen all 23 seasons of SVU. I don't think I started watching it when it started, but once I picked it up, I went back and caught up. So I've probably seen them all. But I have to say, I am not the expert that some of our friends who are also clergy, who are also SVU fans, I'm not the expert that many of them are. So I am here as the fangirl, not as the trivia expert.
That is what 2-on-1 is all about. We're about some questions and conversations, not necessarily as we have with what we didn't say to you earlier, which we just said to everyone, this is not a final ordination interview. You do not have to have all the answers. This is a conversation about why.
That's right.
You were the one that reached out to me, and I tweet about it because I tweet about pop culture, and I love it. I'm like you. I did not start because it came out in the 90s, and I don't know that was not my focus as a, like in my late teens is that, but then started watching probably around season 4 or 5, as this is what we watch every week. And then, but I remember there would be times even probably just up to a couple years ago where, you're doing laundry on a Saturday and USA plays them all day long. And then there's one that I'm have I seen, what is this episode? And it is the greatest, Holy Spirit moment of being I know you need a little something new.
Right. And it's also the most amazing collection of guest star appearances. And the random episode that you will catch from season 3 while you're in a hotel at a conference kind of thing. And it's there's Viola Davis. What?
Totally. Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Everyone has been on. Yeah.
Yeah. Somewhere there's a list of all the guest stars that have been on, and it's unreal.
Well, and I mean, I have friends in New York City who are who are doing the actor's life, and they joke that they move up a tier in pay and prestige when they're the body discoverers. And I know at least 2 who have been well, yeah, I mean, if we're gonna sell briefcases that are, oh my God, a body, and I love it.
I have congregants that have been on it that will come and be okay, Pastor, so just so you know, my episode is blah, blah, and I'm I cannot wait.
Love it.
I get so excited. I love to support all of my congregants, but there's something about my SVU congregants that keeps my little love heart. So
exactly. Too funny.
Yeah. Well, again, it's gonna be our transitional sound. Do churches need a transitional sound? There's a question for us.
Sometimes.
A liturgical transitional sound. What is it?
Exactly. Now we're gonna do this thing. Dun dun.
Well, okay. Actually, so let's talk about this though. So Law and Order is for those of you who I always try to do this thing where it's and also we're a spoiler show, so spoil away whatever that
spoilers.
New season starts tomorrow night, so if you're not caught up, get caught up because that's why I was Courtney, you got to come on now.
Get busy.
Law and Order follows the process of the idealized process of law and order. A crime happens, it is investigated, it is sent over to the district attorney's office where Raul Esparza or somebody is going to deal with it for a few seasons. But usually in the episode, there is crime investigation trial. And there is some resolution. It may not be what the state would want or what justice seems to demand, but there's some sort of resolution each and every week. And there's a through line that gets developed in the 22 seasons about Benson and Stabler. I'm sorry, I'm the number 3 fan in this room.
It's fine. I'm just what? Because Stabler leaves in season 11 and is now only back. So
Yes,
That's right.
and there's
I think
so
it's
like, but the kind of beauty of this show too is that, you know, you'll have a DA for a while
Mhm.
and all these ADAs, and then the ADAs will get a different job or they will move, and very rarely, you know, they're killed in the line of action, and you know, cops come and go, and
Witness protection.
yeah,
I was like, spoiler, she wasn't killed.
so but that's the so I think about it with churches, right?
Mhm.
And with congregations, what would it mean if we took on the law and order precept of we're only here temporarily anyhow? Congregations are no longer seeing lifers.
Mhm.
They're instead seeing people who they're not even lifelong disciples.
Right.
What happens if the church changes its ethic from I've planted my flag and I'm going to be here for the next 45 years to I'm only going to be here for 3 years? What change can I affect for the reign of God in that time?
Are you talking pastorally or as a member of a
I would say
congregation?
both. Like, what if we leaned into the fact that the reign of that what is it? Mustard plants are perennials, not annuals.
Mm.
Yeah,
Look at you writing a whole book right there.
I actually stole that from Douglas Adams, who wrote The Prostitute and the Family Tree.
There you go. So I just had this conversation, part of this conversation yesterday with two female colleagues, both of whom are United Methodist. And we're talking about the appointment system and how that sort of works versus the call system that we have in the Disciples Church, and that it's both are fraught with challenge and both are ripe with possibility. So what if as a pastor I knew that I was going to be here for 3 years and then I was going to go somewhere else, maybe not a somewhere else of my choosing. Or what if I knew that I was intentionally here for whatever length of season, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, and then I was going to move to a whole different thing. It's an interesting thought, especially for somebody like me who I celebrated in August 25 years of ordination.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And the particularly interesting part of that is that I have served 2 churches, one for 16 years and this one for 9 in a couple of weeks. It'll be 9 years.
Wow.
So both large disciples churches, both as associates with really broad reaching portfolios. So it's sort of an interesting thing to think about. When I moved from the church in Indianapolis, from Geist Christian Church here to Tulsa to Harvard Avenue, one of the things that was exciting about it was the chance to take what I'd learned in those 16 years and move it to a new setting, to a whole new group of people who hadn't seen my dog and pony show yet, who hadn't heard my spiels, but to put what I learned in one location to service in another location. And thinking about doing that on a really compressed time frame, would we become more expert? Would we become more less generalist as pastors and more specialists? And what does that mean for the way we structure staff, for large churches, for small churches, for medium-sized churches, for denominational offices? It's an interesting thought to think about it being a more compressed time frame, and that that there's a rotation coming up.
Well, and we're all interims, and then we're not fundraising to keep our salary for the next year.
Right.
That's something that happens. Hopefully, not with any of the 3 of us, but it instead becomes like, great, I'm out of here after my contract expires in season 15.
And what does it do for relationship building? I mean, with congregation, with colleagues, are you more inclined to go deeper into a relationship faster because it's going to be short-lived, or are you more reserved because you're not going to be there for a while? I don't know.
It's not. Sorry. Go ahead, Arthur.
No.
I don't know that it's short-lived, but it's like it just takes a new form, right? Because so much of what we talk about in like the leaving process, the discernment, the death of whatever was into whatever could be,
right,
is often a one of like deep, like a deep cut, right? We kind of assume it's like, well, bye forever, and it's like, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I wonder if it postures us well if if you set these expectations of a timeline to say this is for this role where I'm going to be, but also it allows us to also together be something new. For me, I've always again, reserve the right to change this at any time, but I have always kind of understood that the science of the human body, right? All of our cells fully regenerate every 7 years. So like in 7 years, you are a fully new person, like just all of it. And so is every member of your congregation. So is your church. So for me, I have always said, any contract I sign, if it's, if I'm like a settled pastor, if we're doing those things, I will do that for 7 years, because at 7 years, if we are not entirely new people leaning into Jesus in entirely new ways, we haven't changed, we haven't leaned into that growth and that space that God has given us to renew. And also, it doesn't mean I'm going to leave. It just means I want to make sure that the vision we're casting together and the leadership that I provide this community and how they understand what God is calling them to do is assessed, right? Because my issue is never how long someone stays. It's how rarely we do the process of discernment within our own space to say, am I still the right fit? Is God still calling me? Because comfort does a lot for us, and I'm not discounting that. But what does the ability to say, we are new, we are people of the resurrection, here is our newness, how does that inform this next chapter? What do we want to accomplish, and am I that right person, and are you the right community for me?
Right. And one of the things that I have said when, people are like, oh my gosh, how did you, 16 years is a long time to stay somewhere, especially as an associate and, that sort of thing. I'm like, well, it's not like I did the same thing for 16 years. I mean, every time the calendar came around, the congregation in a growing church and in an engaged staff, you and they are different the next time the season comes around. But also, I mean, I had 4 different offices and 3 different titles in the 16 years that I was there, and same senior pastor the whole time, but lots of different associates in different configurations. And, the congregation grew, and so different people came, and some people moved, and others left for other reasons, and people died, and kids were born. And so the whole place looks different around you, even if you're in place for a while. So Olivia, right? I mean, she's been there, but the whole cast keeps changing around her.
Oh, so Ben.
Sometimes you're like, yeah, it's good that they only had a 4-episode arc. I'm tired of that person. They can, glad that was a temporary cast member.
There are cast members that I'm like, this is not going to last.
I'm fine with them going on.
What if we change the ethic though, then? I mean, or how does it look when we change the ethic in the church of not only clergy saying, okay, at 7 years I'm gone, or I'm only here for 3 years, or we're all interims. What was it? Was it Yaconelli who said he was the interim youth minister for like 40 years at the church he served because he just refused to settle down, not settle. But also too, if interstate moves are not rare anymore, the sudden transference or anything else, or really just going to the Methodist church down the street because I'm pissed off about the color of the carpet or whatever. What
that would never happen.
What?
Yeah. I have a friend who they did literally have a fight over carpet, and
I had one too.
It is used as an example. Yeah. Well, you know why there's a Second Baptist church in town, because red carpet's for heretics. But they, sorry, Baptists, I love you.
I love you.
We love you.
There's never a Second Disciples church. Anyways, okay. I lost my train of thought. No, so what if it's the temporary viewpoint then? And how does that, I guess it's that matter of, with COVID, I realized there's so many traditions and so many power structures and so many funnels through which we put ministry that just don't matter, that immediately evaporated or collapsed. And for the most part, they haven't been rebuilt. How do we continue that in the I don't say oeuvre, in the style of Law and Order? How do we keep the through line of Olivia Benson, but we gladly even get rid of Munch when it's time, spiritually?
It's not without hard work.
Right.
I mean, I would say Olivia has been, you have to be part of it. Sorry, and I didn't, Courtney, do you want to?
No, go. You go first.
I think part of it is Olivia, there is passion there. We have, like there have been people on the squad that are like, do you want to move up? Do you want to become a, and they're like, no. they don't want to go through that, or they do. Finn is still there, right? So Finn's been there the whole time. So you have these long-standing relationships. But also, I think that there's a space of discernment. I think we have seen in several different seasons, Olivia say, is this what I want to do? Is this who I am called to be? Because she has a really hard space. I would say she's probably the one that offers some of the most curiosity around the structure of the unit and police writ large. And as someone who, takes the posture of, I believe that we need a restructure, we should defund the police to restructure and understand how we support communities. I don't think that Olivia would disagree with that. And yet, what does it mean to lead in that space? And
right.
So, I think she offers kind of some faithful discernment models for us to say, it's okay to question even something that you feel deeply called to.
Yeah. And it's the wrestling between an organization, a police department or a church that's built around the charisma of a leader, or that's built around the call and the purpose. And so if in the church, we're going to say that our purpose as church is living the gospel, in our case, the gospel of Jesus Christ, in whatever faith community, to say our purpose is to look to something larger than ourselves. Spread that across the faith tradition of your choice. If our purpose is to look to something larger than ourselves, then it theoretically doesn't matter who's in the captain's chair or how long that person is there. The reality of human nature is that we're drawn to the charisma of the person who's at the front or in the big office or whatever. And that's just the nature of how we live and exist in the world. But I think that if that person takes it upon themselves to redirect the focus all the time to, we're looking out for the victim first, we're protecting the vulnerable, or we're preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, we're serving the community, whatever it is that we say is our focus, it's the leader's call and obligation and responsibility to redirect everybody's focus to what really matters, which is not them, but the other thing, the bigger picture. And so I think that in theory, the longevity of the person in the role shouldn't matter if we can agree across the board that the work that we share is more important than who gets the credit for it, or whose name is at the top of the cast list, or the the front of the webpage or whatever.
Well, it's a deconstruction of understanding ourselves as faith leaders as first in command. It's like, okay, the credit goes to Jesus in our right. The credit doesn't get to go to us, or we shouldn't care that it does. We do, like it just
well, and some of it is it's a job. I mean, Law and Order is SVU is an ensemble show, but it definitely stars certain people.
Mariska Hargitay, whose name translates to Mary Magdalene and was intentionally named that way, just in case we all like her name is Mariska Magdalena Hargitay, and was literally, I know, I was just reading this and I was like, what? And so her mom,
more you know.
Exactly. And so her mom and dad intentionally named her Mary Magdalene as someone who would have great authority and wisdom within the church and as a female leader.
Goodness.
Which I'm like, okay, Olivia Benson from the start, like, come on.
All for it.
And I mean, her mom's Jane Mansfield, right? So she comes up through some acting chops, so she's got some things there. But I have a question that's been circulating, because one of the characters that continues to evolve and move is who, as we kind of named earlier, is the ADA. And who's really is not a part of the squad, but is a part of the squad. And we all have those people for us, our social workers, our, whoever it is, our general board leaders, our regional ministers, whoever it is, right? We all have those people that help influence how and what we do, and do we do it well. But for the first, I think it's the first time, we saw Carisi move up from the squad into that new space. And I thought, that's a really cool model for the church is, y'all know, this is one of those shows I watch over and over again, regardless of what else is on. And, and I love, don't get me, I love Barba, I love Cabot, I love, they
Right.
offer some really great stuff. But what does it look like when people are discerning a call to ministry or service? And what we generally do is say, you're going to make a great pastor. Congregational leadership, there it is. God has put this, this call to leadership in the church on you, and we say congregational leader. And yet so often it can be something else, right? How do we as faith leaders help people discern that overarching call of God calling you to some of this work, right? To this leadership role in the church. But does it have to be, one way or the other? Because I think they probably would have said, oh, you have this new calling, Carisi, for more leadership and engagement, take the lieutenant test, move up in the way that we have seen modeled come before us. But instead, he's like, I'm going to help in this way. I don't know. Do either of you in your own discernment have ways in which you kind of navigate the road next followed?
So before I got married and found my kid, I always thought that I'd want to do interim ministry, because to be able to go in for 6 months or 2 years or whatever, and again, it's I'm temporary. Me as much as you want. I have permission to cause havoc and to say, why is that flag there? That's not Jesus or whatever. And yet
no specific reference there.
Yes, no. Interim ministry seems to be the purview of retired ministers, which kind of makes sense. But why wouldn't you want, if I'm First Christian Church of Schitt's Creek or wherever, and I want to attract young people, why wouldn't I hire a young person to look in the space and say, this is perhaps a way to change it? If my church felt like they were disproportionately male and old and white, why wouldn't we seek to put someone else that doesn't fit those characteristics into that space to help guide us, and also be someone who's like, I am here doing this work with you? I know that's the sideways answer to your question, Spiff. I think the other side in discernment is, if all gifts are valid, why do we think congregational ministry, and particularly senior pastoring, is the end all be all of congregational work? I would love the idea that every church gets rid of their senior pastor and says everyone is a specialist. I am sure that certain people will disagree with me on that, but what does it mean to specialize? Like why no one can actually do what a senior pastor's job title is? I don't care, or job description is. Associate ministers are not less than. Associate ministers are targeted, focused, precise people. Shouldn't we know ourselves and our churches best? So I have a lot of opinions about that structure, and I don't know if I actually answered that question. So what I'm going to do is just do this.
Courtney, how do you discern how you are called to serve?
So part of the reason that I stayed, like I said, for 16 years and now almost 9 years here at Harvard Avenue, is because, like I said, I never did the same thing the whole time. And I think that some of that was born of necessity. Some of that was born of what the congregation needed of someone. And I happened to be the someone to fill that space in the moment. I think some of it, though, is I haven't had let me say that in a different way. I have had the great gift of serving with multiple staff, large congregation settings. So it's a really unique experience that I realize doesn't translate to everybody's situation. But one of the things that also happens is that when you have multiple staff, you do have sort of areas of specialty among your associates and program staff and that sort of thing. But that also means that you create pockets within the congregation where folks have areas of specialty. And that's a matter of discerning the gifts of exegeting the congregation, right? Reading out of the community what they're bringing. But the fun part for me has been the chance to see someone's professional gift or a personality trait and saying, what if we moved that over here for ministry? So someone who does who's an adult education specialist and works with organizations to help find executives, imagined with me a way to help people get involved in community service and outreach projects through the church. Created a whole structure and a whole program where people like took tickets and claimed their spot and said, this is my thing, and then put those people together to take ownership of it. Now, that was not something that I could have come up with myself, Lord knows. I had pieces of the idea, but I needed somebody who had the more constructive mentality around putting the scaffolding together to make that happen. So discernment for me is not only about how I'm serving, but how I'm drawing other people into service. And so your Carisi example, I think is a really good one, besides the fact that I really like him a lot. But I think
this crawling's crossover, I'm real into too. So there's that.
I know, right? But the way that he said, I want to do this instead, but continues to show up and bring sort of his policiness into his ADA-ness, I think is really important. And it's part of what we talk about in the church is like, I'm not just a person of faith when I'm within the church building or when I'm doing a church thing or when I'm, that sort of thing. So I think that it matters that we help people define their role and discern their ministry. That doesn't only involve what happens when they're in the building with us for a couple hours on a Sunday.
Yeah. And I think, that's really helpful. And I think part of what I'm hearing you say is that like the discernment process is one that is not necessarily a new, I mean, it is a new road, but it is a road that is a continuation of where you have come from and not a complete start over from a new beginning. We bring to as a second career person, I bring in my expertise in branding and marketing and all of and management of a large space and large budgets. And so I've always as I discerned calls and I am grateful for, and this is weird to why TV has meant so much to me as someone who has lived on her own for the last 20 years, just meaning not even roommates, right? I live by myself. So sometimes there are connections that I get to characters such as Olivia, who I'm like, ooh, she's doing the thing, right? Like there's something and as a woman in ministry, as I discerned both my call to ministry to leave my job as a producer to in LA with my people and go to Texas as a liberal vegetarian Democrat. Real questionable.
That's thing. Redundant.
That is niche marketing in Texas.
But I grasped onto things. I was like, okay, at first I thought, no, this is a totally new space. And as I've grown, good mentorship and good friendships and why discernment is meant to be done in community, which is, I think, why Carisi is successful at maintaining those relationships, is that people said, you just weren't passionate about this gift, so let's get rid of it. But you're great at these gifts and you like them. So let's mesh those and move into it. And then you'll get the people that are like, I have always felt called. So Arthur, I will push back. I do believe people can do senior ministry. I am called to senior ministry. But I have had people over and over again, right? I was taking this call. My current call is the executive minister up here. And I was stopped by someone in that region who asked me, are you sure you want to leave? Because we have some really great children's ministries here. And children deserve better than someone who does not feel called to that ministry. That is not.
It's Biff, you have 2 X chromosomes. I
do. I know. Isn't that incredible? What a gift it is. But just saying, that, and Benson has that same thing, right? That she comes up against, all the scrutiny of what it means for her as a woman to really move, from detective, lieutenant, captain, all the things. And that can be really empowering for those of us that both live alone or are in new spaces and or don't necessarily have the community yet built to help us discern these things, and also a call to responsible mentorship, I think, because I think she does that well.
One of the things that the show does too that I think is a really great sort of extension of that is that it also will call back to previous stories or previous characters, or whether it's a member of the team or a person that was, part of another case, or an FBI agent or whatever. So there's always sort of that callback to, hey, here's the thing that we learned from this. So it's not like once they're gone, or once they move to a different position, they're only that. And one of the things, a billion lessons that pandemic ministry has taught us. One of the things is that sometimes there are things that you sat down because you needed to, that we do not need to pick back up again. There are some things that we're like, we can't do this right now. And then when we could, should we? But then there are some where you're like, we really need to figure out how to make this work again, because this is critical to who we are. And we learned that from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever.
Well, when congregations always say we want youth and children, it's always, do you want it for the perpetuation of your culture, or do you want it because ministering to young people is an important thing? And discerning that and understanding that the latter requires time and money and investment and time, oftentimes will deter some. And I wish we made better permission, or gave better permission to congregations to say it's okay to serve the community you're serving until it's time to close. I will also say, Spiff, I think pushing back on the senior pastor thing, solo pastorate is without a strong laity next to impossible.
Yeah.
That is perhaps what I mean. I'm in a formerly solo pastorate, and I'm thankful beyond belief each and every day for the associate minister within this congregation. I will also say, the Reverend Dr. Irie Session once said, and I just think it's brilliant, and I've shared it 10,000 times, and I will share it another million before I die.
We're big fans of Reverend Dr.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Irie said, "You do not pay me to do ministry. You pay me to live while I do ministry with you."
Oh.
And I have always understood call since then, because of course that's speaking of final ordination interviews, or speaking of the call to ministry. That's the set apartness. The church says, you are doing ministry with us, and we want you to focus on that, and therefore we will support you, and we will authorize to do some things for us and with us and in spite of us. That's it. That
is something that is incumbent on us to remind the congregation, because particularly when we're in, as Sam Sanders calls it, the panorama, as we're in the panorama ministry right now, and everything is just exponentially more. It's harder, it's sadder, it's more difficult, it's more frustrating. Everything is just more right now. There's also a creeping sense, I've heard in conversation with colleagues, there's also this creeping sense of, fix this because you're our customer service employee, and we want you to fix it and make it work the way we want it to work. It's the capitalist consumer mentality, right?
I will be fed, or I will go somewhere else, and I have a list of demands, and I'm holding a gun to the head of this church.
Yeah, and so the reminder, man, if we weren't already fans of Irie, that's enough to bring you in right there.
It is. That was
a word.
It's a word that I just sat with for like days. I know.
I'm like just soaking it in right now.
That's good. But it also is a call to just practices in compensation practices.
Yes.
Because I think in this time we have also seen certain people, and I would say probably the younger people, who have, given their gifts of knowing how to do all the tech stuff for certain churches, that we just assume you're going to give, right? But like these are their gifts. These are part of that generation's really strong gifts. And so why would you know, if you need a new Facebook page because your church doesn't have one, and and not the kids aren't even on Facebook, but but they can set it up for you, you should pay them, or talk to them about, is this a gift you're willing to share? Like there are these expectations. We all have our own individual gifts that we come with, and there is an expectation of building community that you kind of share them freely, but that doesn't always mean all of them always, and for what, right? Like that there are parts of us that we can say, absolutely, this is part of who I am, what I'm doing, and also part of this probably should be compensated in this way because it is an expertise that I share, and we need that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that and Arthur, I think what I'm also hearing in you, and this was a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, the pastorate writ large was structured as a 2-person job because the wife stayed home and helped. And so you free labor for years and years and years. And it was all of a sudden women came into ministry, single women who don't have partners or anybody to help do this. And the expectation of what it looks like to complete a job or to do it well then falls twofold on you to do. And so how do we balance that there? And going back to SVU, I think that there is part of that, what that looks like when we see, let's say, Olivia and Rollins have these conversations about what it means to be single mothers. Olivia has made this space to say, no, you get to do that, how do you support the different types of people called to this work and the different resources that they bring and the different needs that come along with just who we are as unique individuals.
And that her team has to remind her of her responsibility sometimes too. When something happens with Noah, they're like, no, go do that. We've got this.
Yep.
So her team has to remind her of her other than leader role.
Yeah. Congregation, start reminding your pastors to take a Sabbath or to
take your day off. Take your vacation time.
I'm going to celebrate my congregation because I just don't get called on Fridays.
God bless them.
They just don't. And it's never like I've served churches where I've had to have a Google Voice number so that I could turn it off on Fridays. And then they found my real number. And then I moved. But it's also one of those so we had a board meeting and it was my kid's birthday. And it was the first birthday that she was celebrating with us. And I sent an email to the board that said, here's my report. I'm not going to be there tonight. Duh. And I got no response. And I thought, oh no, they're mad. And literally the conversation in the board meeting was, Arthur's not here because it's daughter's birthday. And one person goes, that's exactly what should happen. And they just move on. And it's
that's it.
And I'm so thankful for that. And so that,
I think that comes back to good mentorship though, right? About learning how to grow and do together in new and expansive ways. For my church, we do sabbaticals yearly. So we get I don't know, Arthur is on.
That was shaking my head because I'm jealous, not because I disagree.
I didn't know what you were saying. Sorry.
I thought he was muted because he was cussing.
I did too. We also get our sabbaticals at the end of a long, like our long sabbaticals, but how we do it is we get a month every year on top of our vacation because of the work and the vision that our church has cast together, of saying like, we're a really justice oriented congregation, which sometimes means that we are working round the clock for an entire week straight, using an entire month's worth of, let's say 40-hour work weeks in a couple days. Right. And so for us to maintain renewal and encouragement and passion for the work we are called to do, we get that. And I am terrible at taking my other vacation, and my community continuously reminds me, and that is great. But I had never heard of that model, and I love to share that.
I haven't either. It's fantastic.
It doesn't mean like that is what that grow. That's how we're called to grow. It doesn't mean that Harvard Avenue needs to take that model on, but it means that knowing that offers some curiosity as to what also might be possible should a system break or need some sort of attention. I don't know. Just saying Harvard Avenue because that's where you're at.
Yeah. Well, and it's the thing. So the scripture, the story of the Syrophoenician woman was up a couple of weeks ago in worship. And the thing that I love, one of the things I love about that text is that it points up that even the person who has done all of the teaching and should know the best what is supposed to happen and be said and be done needed someone to say, yeah, but aren't you supposed to do it this way? And so Jesus needed that woman to go, but shouldn't we also get some of what is going around here? And so I think that there's something to be said for the mentoring that we as pastoral leaders do, but we also need to have people who mentor us, either from the side or from above, or some, similar role or an entirely different role that can serve as a mentor because of situational, circumstantial commonalities. But so I think that it's important, like I said, that Olivia has those conversations and those roles with her staff, but her staff also is reminding her of who she's supposed to be in her role. And I don't know that enough of our colleagues are blessed with a situation like that.
Totally. And I think that, that's not my final answer, but I'm like, I could totally make a case for Olivia as the Syrophoenician woman, because it's Matthew, right? Sorry. She's the first woman to speak in Matthew in the entire gospel. And so the first thing that the book of or is it Mark? Sorry. What was it?
Matthew.
Okay, I was like, but the first thing is, so of our first gospel, not the first one written, but in our how it's laid out, our first gospel, the first woman that speaks talks back to Jesus, like pushes against him for female reproductive care, and or female attention to the female body and spirit. And that is exactly how Olivia has not only, that is her ethic, I think, of her responsibility to the people that she serves, but also how she has stayed faithful to her growth. And so while that's not my final answer, I was like, ooh, I like that tracks. And because I also preached on that and was like, the first thing we get from a woman in these gospels, and it's telling Jesus, this is not how we do this in this community.
Right.
You need to pay better attention to the women.
Right. But what I thought you said was,
yeah, absolutely.
I like that. And unfortunately, that noise means that it's time for us to be cognizant of the time and move on to our final question. This time we're going to call it, though, after jury deliberations for the sake of maintaining at least some semblance of parity.
Got it.
I love it. Courtney, thank you for coming on.
Oh my gosh, this is fun. I can't believe we're already through our time.
I told you,
it
it flies. It is always a good time for those of you out there that are like questioning whether or not to reach out to us and come on the show. I swear it's fun, y'all.
Super fun.
And you get to talk about things that you're passionate about, which is church and Jesus and the shows that we're all watching.
Right.
So
I'm just going to throw out there, because sometimes people are like, I don't know a topic. I would like to talk about Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I am as obsessed with that show as these two are obsessed with Law and Order SVU. If you're somebody who loves Brooklyn Nine-Nine, please reach out to us, twoonone project@gmail.com. Thank you.
We'll help you, y'all. We have a list of things that people keep suggesting that we should do topics for. And then we're like, you should come on. And they're like, I'm not good on Skype. Come on. It's a fun conversation.
Somebody I know is on that list for you, Arthur. I'm thinking of who it is.
Okay.
It'll come to me.
I love it. But Courtney, thank you again for coming on, for saying yes when I was like, Courtney, you want to talk SVU? But as is our tradition, to answer the final question, what biblical book, narrative, character, or theme are you most reminded of in Law and Order Special Victims Unit?
Okay. Because you gave me a sneak preview of what my final question was going to be, I did give it a millisecond of thought the other day. And several came to mind, but the one that I keep coming back to, and hang on with me for a second, because I'll get there. When we're asked for like our metaphor in ministry, or our, how do you define your ministry? I always talk about companionship, because mine is such a side-by-side kind of work, spiritually, physically, emotionally. It's about being with people. We're invited into vulnerable spaces with people, hospital bedsides, funerals, weddings, holding babies, praying together, leading in worship, welcoming people into the church who have been, as my friend Guido Clymer says, unchurched, dechurched, or badly churched. So spending time with people who are choosing to be part of what we're doing in this churchiness. So my leadership has always been from the side. I don't like to sit at the head of a table, those sorts, very companionship model. So the Road to Emmaus story is profound in a lot of ways. Spoiler alert, because at the end of the story, they recognize that it's Jesus.
What?
For those of you who haven't,
gotten through Luke yet.
If you missed that one in seminary, go back, check it out. because of the obvious piece where they recognize Jesus because of how he serves and what he says. And they go, oh, hey, we've heard this before. We know this guy. But because there are companions on the road, it's not that there was one traveler to Emmaus that Jesus then came up to, but they were traveling together and talking about what had happened. And I think that it's significant that it wasn't just Jesus encountering some random person on the road, but that there were partners on that journey. They were going side by side. So for me, the fact that SVU is an ensemble feeds to that, right? Because yes, you know, Olivia is clearly the leader of the team. She's the star of the show. She's the longevity of the series and all of those things. But I find myself much more interested in everybody else on the team. And that probably puts me in the vast minority. There are times when I'm like, yeah, I could have done without, you know, that scene with Olivia, and she didn't bring to it what Finn or Rollins or Carisi, I mean, or any of the other people. I mean, I'm a Finn fan from day one. But I love that there's an ensemble and that everybody gets a thing. When you go to jury duty, the judge says, no, this doesn't all happen in, 60 minutes like it does on Law and Order. But it's nice to at least think that when things are particularly painful and vulnerable and violent and all of the things that we see on SVU, that there are multiple people who will come alongside and say, here is the hope of the cross that's before us. It is an empty cross because we are the body of Christ, alive and moving in the world. And so let's go do that. Let's go be those companions on that road together. So that's the thing that I kept coming back to, and I was trying to come up with what text or story or character paralleled for me. The road to Emmaus was really the one that I just kept returning to.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's on a millisecond of thought, folks.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, Arthur?
I'm going to go next.
You want to follow that?
I'm going to say the story of Jacob, like as a whole, but specifically wrestling with God and the limping. Jacob's processing his trauma. A lot of it is self-inflicted, as a lot of trauma can be, and it's, talk about, limping towards the sunrise. Yeah, still limping. And it's, I think why SVU has longevity is because it's hard. And there's this hope in it of horrible things will happen and it can still be solved and it can still be tried and it may not work out well, but it's still, here we are. And I mean, the limping on, and just where he divests himself of everything he thinks he wanted before he runs into Esau. And it's just he. And that's where it happens. And I kind of love it. And there's a newness, and I don't know, that came to me during the interview. It's better than my previous answer, so I'm going to go with it. Spiff?
Final answer.
No, and I'm choosing mine for the reason of kind of all of this. And again, I'm just going to name it as, so I'm choosing the unnamed concubine of Judges of 19.
Oh, hello.
And it's because what SVU does for me is it doesn't overlook the harm that we cause each other in this world. It does not brush it under the rug. It talks about how we are terrible to each other. It talks about how we bring hope to each other. It talks about blame. It talks about guilt. It talks about all of that. It doesn't always nicely wrap it up. It doesn't always point the right finger at the right person. It isn't even always curious in the right ways. But it names the trauma. And sometimes that's really, in biblical stories, I've noticed, we love to just pass right on over them. And who are we, like this unnamed woman, who is she? What were her thoughts, hopes, dreams? Who was she? And I believe that it is the responsibility of Christians who use these texts faithfully to inform who we are in this world, to exegete, to be the squad that finds out. And so while that text is horrendous and awful and they're pointing blame, and you're like, oh, I know exactly who to blame. Like there's all sorts of people here to blame. And it's not wrapped up nicely, but it calls us to action in a way that says these victims, these women, this sadness is dealt with to get best in community. And part of our call as a community of faith is to unearth these stories faithfully and do better.
Love that. Love that.
Well, Reverend Courtney Richards, this has been 2 on 1, and thank you for being our guest today to talk about SVU.
Thank you.
It's amazing that we can sometimes do like 22 years of television in an hour, although there's plenty left to discuss, including Munch. But anyways, we are so glad that you are here. This is a reminder to our listeners, our deuces, our friends, and our enemies that we are sponsored by Jeff One-Row Designs. You can check out everything as the show is wrapping up now at jeffwonrow.com, JEFFWUNROW.com. Use 2 on 1, all one word, all letters, for 15% off your entire stole order. That's basically buy 7, get 1 free, and you should buy 7 stoles.